Captain Lee Minji stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching stars drift past the cracked view screen. Her ship was dying. Warning lights blinked red across every control panel, and the constant hum of damaged systems filled the air like a mechanical death rattle. 3 days ago, the Defiant had been part of humanity's proud defense fleet. Now it was the only ship left. The Zeltharian Empire had struck without warning, their massive warships appearing in human space like dark angels of destruction. Colony after colony had fallen in hours. Military bases that took decades to build were reduced to glowing debris in minutes. Minji touched her bruised ribs, feeling the sharp pain from their last battle. Her uniform was torn and stained with blood from a dozen small wounds. Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations with quiet determination, their faces pale but focused. "Captain," Lieutenant Park Hyun called from his tactical station. "The damage report is ready." His voice was steady, but Minji could hear the exhaustion underneath. She walked over to read the numbers on his screen. They were worse than she had hoped. Main engines running at barely half power. Forward shields completely gone. 6 of their 12 weapon systems offline. Life support working, but only just. "How long can we keep flying?" she asked. "Maybe 2 days if we're careful," Chief Engineer Yoon Ji-soo answered from behind her. He had just climbed up from the lower decks, his jumpsuit covered in coolant fluid and burns. "The fusion reactors are holding together with spare parts and prayer. Another big fight would probably finish us." Minji nodded and walked to the observation windows. Beyond the glass, she could see into the ship's main cargo areas that had been converted into living spaces. Hundreds of people sat on the floor or leaned against walls, sharing what little food and water remained. These were the survivors from New Seoul Colony, 847 men, women, and children who had escaped when the Zeltharian ships arrived. She saw Mr. Lim Seok, an old mining foreman with hands like leather, comforting a crying child. Dr. Song Yoon-ha, who had run the colony's mining operations, was helping distribute medical supplies. There were teachers, farmers, engineers, shop owners, ordinary people who had lost everything and now depended on one damaged warship for survival. "Captain," Communications Officer Kim Dae spoke up, his voice tight with worry. "I'm getting something. On long-range sensors. Multiple contacts, coming fast." The bridge went silent except for the beeping of computers. Everyone knew what multiple contacts meant in this part of space. The Empire had found them. Minji walked back to her command chair and sat down slowly. "Show me." The main screen flickered and displayed a tactical map of local space. 12 red dots moved toward them like predators closing in on wounded prey. Even at this distance, the sensors could identify the ship types. "It's the Crimson Fleet," Kim Dae whispered. Every person on the bridge knew that name. The Crimson Fleet was Admiral Vakthar's personal armada, 12 of the largest, most powerful warships in the Zeltharian Empire. They had destroyed 6 human worlds in the past month. Each of their dreadnoughts was 3 times the size of the Defiant and carried enough firepower to level a city. "How long until they reach us?" Minji asked. "Navigator." Oh-seung checked his calculations twice before answering. 4 hours, maybe 5 if we change course, but Captain, if we run they'll just follow us and we don't have enough fuel to outrun them for long. Minji stared at the red dots on the screen. In her ship's secure storage bay were the navigation codes to humanity's hidden colony worlds, the secret locations where millions of humans lived, unaware that their species was being hunted to extinction. If the Defiant was captured, those codes would lead the Empire to every remaining human settlement. She thought about the refugees in the cargo holds, families who had watched their homes burn, children who had lost their parents, old people who had lived their whole lives building something that was destroyed in an afternoon. They deserved better than to die running through empty space. "Chief Yoon," she called out. "How are our weapons?" The engineer looked surprised. "Captain, even if all our systems were working perfectly, we couldn't fight 12 dreadnoughts. It would be suicide." "That's not what I asked." Yoon paused, then consulted his damage reports. 6 torpedo tubes are still functional. Main energy weapons are at 60% power. Point defense systems are mostly intact. But Captain, Navigator, what's ahead of us on our current course? Sung checked his star charts. There's an asteroid field about 2 hours away. Dense formation. Lots of gravitational anomalies. It's marked as dangerous for navigation. Most ships avoid it. Minji stood up and walked to the center of the bridge. Her crew watched her with expressions of growing understanding and fear. Set course for the asteroid field, she ordered quietly. Captain, Park Hyun protested. That's exactly the kind of place where a small ship could get trapped. If we go in there and they follow us, then we make our stand there. Minji's voice was calm but firm. Signal all departments. Tell them we're going to show these aliens what happens when they corner humans with nothing left to lose. The Defiant changed course toward the asteroid field, carrying its precious cargo of survivors toward what might be humanity's last battle. The asteroid field stretched ahead like a graveyard of broken worlds. Massive rocks tumbled through space, some as large as cities, spinning and crashing into each other in slow motion. The Defiant moved carefully between them, its damaged hull groaning under the stress of constant course changes. Captain Lee, Minji walked through her ship's corridors amazed by what she saw. In every section, her crew worked alongside the refugees to turn their dying warship into something the enemy would never expect. The normal, quiet efficiency of military operations had been replaced by controlled chaos. In the main engineering section, Chief Yoon Ji-soo knelt beside Dr. Song Yoon-ha, the mining supervisor from New Seoul Colony. Between them lay dozens of civilian mining charges, explosives designed to crack open asteroids for mineral extraction. These aren't military weapons, Dr. Song explained, holding up one of the devices. They're meant to fracture rock, not penetrate ship armor. But if we can modify them, Yoon nodded, already understanding. We pack them into our torpedo casings, strip out the guidance systems to make room for more explosive material. They won't be accurate, but if they hit something, they'll hit like a mining blast, Dr. Song finished. I've been using these for 20 years. Trust me, Captain. They can crack things that military explosives can't touch. Minji moved on to the hangar bay, where an even stranger sight awaited her. Weapons Officer Choi Min-ho supervised a group of colonists who were working on small flying machines that looked nothing like military equipment. Mining drones, explained Mr. Lim Seok, the old foreman whose weathered hands moved skillfully over the controls. We use them to survey asteroid fields, find the best places to dig. They're built to fly through dangerous spaces, avoid collisions, think for themselves. And now? Minji asked. Now they're missiles, Choi replied with a grim smile. Each one carries enough explosive to damage a ship's hull. The Empire's defense systems are designed to stop military weapons. Fast, predictable missiles that follow. Straight paths. These drones fly like they're avoiding rocks and debris. Their computers won't know what to target. In the ship's workshop, more refugees worked with the remaining crew members. Park Yeon-soo, a young engineer who had designed mining equipment, bent over a computer terminal with navigator Oh Seung. The asteroids aren't just obstacles, she explained, pointing at the screen. They're weapons if you know how to use them. Look, this big one here is moving slowly, but if we could give it a little push at the right angle. Oh Seung studied her calculations. It would change course and hit that cluster of smaller rocks. The collision would send debris flying in all directions. Exactly. And if enemy ships happened to be in the path of that debris. Park left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear. Minji continued her tour, finding similar scenes throughout the ship. In the medical bay, Dr. Kang Tai-ho worked with retired teachers and shop owners to prepare for casualties, turning classroom supplies and store equipment into medical tools. Children too young to help sat in corners, playing quiet games while adults prepared for war around them. The ship's computer systems had been damaged in their last battle, so Communications Officer Kim Dae worked with a team of colonists to create manual backup controls. Every station now had handwritten charts and mechanical switches, operated by people who had learned their functions in the past few hours. Captain, Lieutenant Park Hyun approached her with a tablet full of numbers and diagrams. I've been working with the mining people on targeting solutions. Military doctrine says we should maintain distance, Use our mobility, try to outrun them, but that won't work here. What will work? Minji asked. Close combat. Get so near to them that their big weapons can't track us properly. Use the asteroids as cover, hit them from unexpected angles, make them fight on our terms instead of theirs. Back on the bridge, the main screen showed the approaching Crimson Fleet. 12 massive dreadnoughts moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems that could destroy planets. They advanced with the confidence of predators who had never been seriously challenged. They're still maintaining military formation, observed Oshung, treating this like a standard pursuit and destruction mission. That's good, Minji replied. It means they're thinking like a regular fleet engaging a regular enemy. They have no idea what they're about to face. Chief Yoon's voice came over the intercom from engineering. Captain, we're ready down here. The mining charges are loaded into every torpedo tube we have left. The civilian drones are armed and programmed. And I've rigged some special surprises in our cargo bays. What kind of surprises? Minji asked. The kind that would get me court-martialed if we survive this, Yoon replied. Let's just say the refugees had some very interesting ideas about what happens when you mix mining equipment with military systems. Weapons Officer Choi checked his modified controls. All systems ready, Captain. We've got weapons that shouldn't exist, tactics that violate every rule of space combat, and a crew that's half civilian volunteers. By all military logic, we should surrender now. Minji looked around her bridge, seeing faces that showed fear, but also determination. Through the viewports, she could see the refugees in the cargo areas, ordinary people who had lost everything but refused to give up. Military logic, she said quietly, is exactly what they'll be expecting. Time to show them what desperate humans can accomplish. The Defiant moved deeper into the asteroid field, ready to fight the most unconventional battle in the history of space warfare. Admiral Vakthar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the tactical display with growing impatience. His forearms were folded across his chest as he studied the human ship's movements through the asteroid field. Pathetic creatures, he clicked to his second-in-command. They hide among rocks like frightened animals. This will be over quickly. The 12 dreadnoughts of the Crimson Fleet moved in perfect formation, their massive hulls reflecting the distant starlight. Each ship was a masterpiece of military engineering, armed with enough firepower to level continents. They had crushed every human defense they had encountered. Maintain formation, Vakthar ordered. We will destroy them with a single coordinated strike. Aboard the Defiant. Captain Lee Minji crouched behind her command chair as the ship shook from another near miss. The bridge was barely lit, running on emergency power to avoid detection. Her crew worked at stations that sparked and smoked, while refugee volunteers operated backup controls with nervous hands. Enemy ships entering the outer edge of the field, reported Communications Officer Kim Dae. They're keeping tight formation just like we hoped. Dr. Song, Minji called to the mining supervisor, who now served as their unconventional weapons coordinator. Are your drones ready? 24 units deployed, Dr. Song replied from her improvised control station. They're programmed to look like floating debris until they get close enough to matter. Navigator Oh Shung threaded the Defiant between two massive asteroids, using their gravitational pull to accelerate the ship faster than its damaged engines should allow. The maneuver would have been impossible without the mining colonists' knowledge of asteroid physics. First target coming into range, Weapons Officer Choi Minho announced. The lead dreadnought is moving exactly where we predicted. The Zeltharian formation approached with overwhelming confidence. Their sensors showed only a small, damaged human ship trying to hide among rocks. Admiral Vakthar prepared to give the order to fire. Now, Minji whispered. 24 mining drones hidden among the asteroid debris suddenly activated their engines and swarmed toward the nearest dreadnought. They moved in erratic patterns, dodging and weaving like insects, their small size making them nearly impossible to track. The Zeltharian point defense systems had been designed to stop military missiles, large, fast projectiles that followed predictable paths. The drones confused their targeting computers, moving too randomly to lock onto too small to trigger proximity sensors. What are those things? Vakthar demanded, as his tactical officer struggled to identify the approaching objects. Unknown contacts, Admiral. They're not showing up properly on our sensors. They appear to be some kind of debris, but they're moving under power. The first drone reached the dreadnought's hull and exploded. Then the second. Then 6 more in rapid succession. The explosions weren't the clean, focused blasts of military weapons. They were the raw, destructive power of mining charges designed to crack open asteroids. The lead dreadnought's shields collapsed under the assault. Its hull, designed to withstand energy weapons, buckled and tore under the brutal force of industrial explosives. Atmosphere vented into space as the massive ship began to list. Impossible, Vakthar hissed. How are they penetrating our defenses? But the humans weren't finished. Chief Engineer Yoon Jisoo had spent hours calculating gravitational trajectories with the refugee mining engineers. As the Zeltharian formation scattered to avoid the crippled dreadnought, they moved directly into a carefully prepared trap. 3 massive asteroids nudged into new orbits by precisely placed explosions, converged on the enemy ships. The rocks moved slowly but with unstoppable force, guided by the same physics that miners use to direct falling stones in quarries. 2 more dreadnoughts tried to maneuver away from the approaching asteroids, but their size worked against them. The massive warships couldn't change course quickly enough. They collided with the rocks at tremendous speed, their hulls crumpling like paper. They're using the asteroids as weapons, Vakthar's tactical officer reported, his voice filled with disbelief. Our formation is broken, 3 ships destroyed. The remaining 9 Zeltharian dreadnoughts began firing wildly, trying to clear the asteroid field with their main weapons. Massive energy beams lanced through space, vaporizing smaller rocks and splitting larger ones. But every destroyed asteroid created more debris, more cover for the human ship. They're panicking, observed Lieutenant Park Hyun from his tactical station. They don't know how to fight in this environment. The Defiant darted between the floating rocks like a fish swimming through coral. The refugee miners guided the ship through paths that would have been suicide for anyone without their experience. Every turn revealed new opportunities for attack. Mr. Lim Seok, the old mining foreman, operated a targeting system with the same steady hands he had used to place explosives in asteroid mines. Next target coming up, Captain. Big one, moving slow and predictable. More modified mining charges launched. From the Defiant's torpedo tubes, following ballistic trajectories that military doctrine said were impossible. They struck a 4th dreadnought, punching through its armor with the brutal efficiency of tools designed to break solid rock. How many ships have we lost? Vakthar demanded. 4 destroyed, 2 heavily damaged, came the reply. Admiral, they're fighting like nothing we've ever encountered. Our tactics manuals have no procedures for this kind of engagement. Through the chaos of battle, Captain Minji watched her impossible plan unfold. Her crew of military personnel and civilian volunteers worked together with desperate precision, turning every piece of mining equipment into a weapon, every asteroid into an ally. 8 ships remaining, she announced to her bridge crew. They're learning our tricks, but they still don't understand what they're really fighting. The trap had been sprung, but the deadliest part of the battle was yet to come. The Defiant spun through space with half its hull glowing red-hot from enemy fire. Captain Lee Minji gripped her command chair as another plasma bolt grazed their starboard side, sending sparks cascading across the bridge. The ship's emergency klaxons had been silenced hours ago. There was no point in announcing dangers that never stopped. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Chief Engineer Yoon Jisoo over the crackling intercom. We're losing atmosphere fast. Main engines down to 20% power, and I can't promise they'll hold together much longer. Around the bridge, half the control stations were now operated by refugees. Mrs. Park Yeon-soo, the mining engineer, calculated firing solutions on a damaged computer while her 10-year-old daughter sat nearby, quietly drawing pictures to stay calm. Old Mr. Lim Seok ran the targeting systems with hands that shook from exhaustion, but never missed their mark. Admiral Vakthar had learned from his mistakes. The remaining 8 Zeltharian dreadnoughts no longer moved in tight formation. Instead, They spread out through the asteroid field, hunting the human ship like wolves surrounding wounded prey. Their tactics had evolved, becoming more cautious and deadly. "They're not falling for our tricks anymore," observed Weapons Officer Choi Minho as he watched the enemy ships on his cracked display screen. "They're staying far enough apart that we can't hit multiple targets but close enough to support each other." "Then we stop being clever," Minji replied grimly. "Dr. Song, how many cargo containers do we have left?" Dr. Song Yunha looked up from her improvised weapons station, her face streaked with sweat and grease. 15 containers all loaded with mining equipment and whatever explosives we could find. But Captain, if we start launching cargo containers, we turn them into missiles," Minji finished, "just like everything else we've done today." The idea was insane by any military standard. Cargo containers weren't weapons. They were slow, clumsy, and completely unprotected. But the refugees from New Seoul Colony weren't thinking about military standards. They were thinking about survival. "I'll pilot the first one," announced Mr. Lim Seok, standing up from his targeting station. "No," Minji said firmly. "We're not sacrificing anyone unnecessarily." "Captain," the old miner replied quietly, "I'm 73 years old. I've spent 50 years blasting rocks in space. If anyone can guide a cargo container full of explosives into an enemy ship, it's me." Before Minji could argue, Dr. Song spoke up. "He's right, Captain. These containers need manual guidance to be effective. Someone has to ride them in at least part of the way." The first cargo container launched from the Defiance Bay, with Mr. Lim Seok inside, guiding it toward the Ko, nearest Zeltharian dreadnought. The container looked harmless on enemy sensors, just another piece of debris floating through the asteroid field. But inside, it carried enough mining explosives to crack open a small moon. The Zeltharian ship's point defense systems ignored the slow-moving container, focusing instead on the Defiant's evasive maneuvers. They didn't realize their mistake until the container was close enough for Mr. Lim to trigger the detonator and escape in a tiny evacuation pod. The explosion tore through the dreadnought's hull like a mining blast through solid rock. The ship's fusion reactors went critical, creating a second explosion that lit up half the asteroid field. "One down," Minji announced as rescue shuttles retrieved Mr. Lim's pod. 7 to go. But the cost was becoming terrible. The Defiant was falling apart under the constant stress of impossible maneuvers. Lieutenant Park Hyun worked at a control station that had been destroyed and rebuilt 3 times. Navigator. Oh Seung calculated courses by hand when his computers failed, using mathematics he had learned as a child. "Captain," Communications Officer Kim Dae called out, "I'm losing contact with engineering. The intercom system is completely destroyed." Minji left the bridge and climbed down through damaged corridors to find Chief Yoon Jisoo. She found him in a compartment filled with smoke and sparks, where he worked alongside teenage refugees to keep the ship's systems running. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad," Yoon replied, not looking up from his repairs. "We've lost primary life support, backup power is failing, and the hull is cracked in 12 places. We're holding together with emergency patches and pure determination." A 17-year-old boy named Kim Jin-ho, who had been studying engineering before his colony was destroyed, looked up from a control panel. "Captain, we could reroute power from the artificial gravity system. It would mean everyone floats, but we might get enough energy for one more big attack." "Do it," Minji ordered. Back on the bridge, the gravity disappeared, sending everyone floating. But the extra power allowed them to launch 4 more cargo containers simultaneously. Each one was guided by a volunteer, colonists who had lost their homes and families, who were determined to make their deaths count for something. Dr. Song coordinated the attack from her station, talking each volunteer through their approach. "Remember, you're not military pilots. You're miners doing what you've always done, placing explosives where they'll do the most damage." 3 more Zeltharian dreadnoughts fell to the crude but effective tactic. Their crews couldn't understand how the humans continued to fight with weapons that shouldn't exist, tactics that made no sense, and a ship that should have been destroyed hours ago. 4 ships remaining, Park Hyun reported as debris from the latest explosion drifted past there. The bridge of the Defiant, floated in darkness, lit only by the red glow of emergency lights and the sparks from damaged systems. Captain Lee Minji pulled herself along guide cables, moving through the zero gravity that now filled her dying ship. Around her, the surviving crew and refugees worked at stations that barely functioned. "Power at 5%, Chief Engineer Yoon Jisoo reported through a handheld radio, his voice crackling with static. "The fusion reactors are going critical. I can give you maybe 10 minutes of engine power, but after that..." He didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened when fusion reactors failed. Through the cracked view screen, Admiral Vakthar's 4 remaining dreadnoughts closed in like hungry sharks. The Eternal Conquest led the formation, its massive hull scarred but still deadly. The Zeltharian commander had finally realized he was fighting something beyond normal warfare, but he was determined to finish what he had started. "All weapons offline," reported Weapons Officer Choi Minho, floating near a control panel that sparked and smoked. "We've got nothing left to fight with." Dr. Song Yunha drifted over to Captain Minji, her mining supervisor's uniform torn and stained. "Captain, there might be one more option. In the cargo hold, we still have all the mining equipment we couldn't use. Industrial cutters, rock crushers, fusion torches. If we could somehow..." "Somehow what?" Minji asked. "Turn the whole ship into..." "A mining charge," Dr. Song replied quietly. "One final blast big enough to take them all with us." Navigator Oh Shung looked up from his manual calculations. "Captain, there's one asteroid in this field that's been stable throughout the entire battle. It's massive, bigger than a city. If we could ram it at the right angle, with the right amount of explosive force..." Old Mr. Lim Seok, who had somehow survived piloting a cargo container into an enemy ship, floated over to join the conversation. "In mining, we call it a cascade collapse. You hit the right spot on a big rock and the whole thing comes apart like a puzzle. The debris field would be deadly to anything in the area," Minji finished, understanding the plan. "Including us." "Captain," Communications Officer Kim Dae called out, "I'm getting evacuation pod requests from all over the ship. The civilians want to abandon ship." Minji activated the ship's internal communication system. Her voice echoed through corridors filled with floating debris and frightened people. "This is the captain. I'm ordering all non-essential personnel to the escape pods. That means everyone except the bridge crew and engineering team." She expected immediate compliance. Instead, voices called back from throughout the ship. "We're staying, Captain," came Dr. Song's voice over the intercom. "My family died on New Seoul," added Mrs. Park Yeonsu. "This is where we make our stand." "We've come this far together," said teenage Kim Jinho from the engineering section. "We're not leaving now." One by one, the refugees and colonists announced their decision to stay. Teachers, farmers, shop owners, and miners. Ordinary people who had already lost everything and refused to run again. "Navigator," Minji said quietly, "plot a course for the big asteroid." "Chief Yoon, how much explosive material do we have left in storage?" "Everything," Yoon replied over the radio. "Every mining charge, every piece of unstable equipment, every chemical that could make a big bang. If we detonate it all at once against that rock..." The implications were clear. The explosion would shatter the asteroid into millions of pieces, creating a debris storm that would destroy everything in the area, including the 4 Zeltharian dreadnoughts and the Defiant itself. "Do it," Minji ordered. The Defiant began its final approach, its damaged engines screaming as they pushed beyond every safety limit. Admiral Vakthar, watching from his flagship, suddenly understood what the humans intended. "Emergency evasive maneuvers," he commanded. "They're planning to ram the asteroid," but his ships were too large, positioned too perfectly in what would become the kill zone. The dreadnoughts began to turn, but their massive hulls moved too slowly. 30 seconds to impact, Oh Sung announced, his voice steady despite the circumstances. In the cargo hold, Chief Yoon made final connections to the largest improvised explosive device ever assembled by desperate humans. Around him, colonist volunteers said goodbye to families over handheld radios, their voices calm and determined. 10 seconds, Minji announced to her ship. "It has been an honor fighting alongside all of you. The Defiant struck the Ancient asteroid at ramming speed just as its cargo bay erupted in an explosion visible from 3 star systems away. The massive rock, stable for millions of years, cracked along hidden fault lines and shattered into countless fragments. City-sized pieces of stone raced outward at impossible velocities, driven by the force of humanity's final desperate gambit. 2 Zeltharian dreadnoughts vanished instantly, crushed by debris moving faster than their shields could deflect. A 3rd ship was crippled, its hull torn open by smaller fragments. Admiral Vakthar's flagship survived the initial impact but drifted, powerless, its engines destroyed and weapons offline. In the wreckage that had been the Defiant's bridge, Captain Lee Minji pulled herself from the twisted metal, her vision blurring from blood loss and smoke. Through the static of damaged communications, she heard Admiral Vakthar's voice. "How?" he asked simply. "Your ship was inferior. Your weapons were primitive. You should have died within minutes." Minji smiled through the pain, tasting blood. "You made one mistake, Admiral. You thought we were fighting to win. We were fighting so others could live." As her consciousness faded, she could hear the sound of escape pods launching, refugees carrying word that humanity would never surrender, would never be easily conquered. The Empire had learned what desperate humans could accomplish when they had nothing left to lose.